All right, guys, I'm going to talk about blood sugar and then we're going to take some notes on diabetes. So, real quick, blood sugar, normal is right around 90 milligrams per deciliter. I did not look this up for this video, but I know there's kind of a range where your blood sugar is, you would consider yourself in homeostasis in that range, so not a specific number. So, here's an ideal scenario. Here is how your bodies have evolved to be able to handle blood sugar spikes, okay? Most cultures probably had 2 meals a day. There's not a lot of proof that 2 meals a day is safe for younger people, so let's go ahead and go with the assumption that 3 meals a day is what we want. So you wake up in the morning, your blood sugar is low, okay, and let's say you have some cereal and orange juice for breakfast. So it's a pretty steep spike, and it comes down pretty quickly. And then you feel like you're hungry again. Now, if you would have ate something with fiber in it, something with protein, it would have lasted a little bit longer, but let's assume you didn't. So you eat lunch, maybe you ate a little healthier lunch, and then you eat dinner, and then you sleep, and the blood sugar goes back down. So if your body is healthy, you should be able to regulate your blood sugar fairly easy. You should be able to have no problem regulating blood sugar overnight when it's kind of low, but still enough for your brain to function fully. So this is an ideal scenario. We have 3 spikes per day, and the body can handle this, meaning there won't be any problems with your type 2 diabetes if this is your scenario. But let's look at a more common scenario. So in developed countries, United States, 2021, what does the blood sugar actually look like? Well, you wake up, you have, I don't know, some sort of coffee or fruit drink full of sugar. You get that spike, comes back down really quickly, okay? Maybe you snack, maybe you have another coffee. Once again, this isn't necessarily everybody. Comes back down, okay? You have a lunch, but you don't have a good lunch. You have a tall spike there. You didn't have fiber, you didn't have enough protein in your lunch. You're gonna snack again, you're getting a little tired before lunch, and then you eat dinner, okay? You get a nice slow spike there, and then you have another stack before bed, and then nighttime comes. So here's a more realistic scenario where if we eat or drink sugary beverages 6 times a day, now we have 6 spikes. And we can see that this compared to this, you spend a lot more time above where you want to be. So the ideal range, we spend a lot more time above that in a modern developed world's diet. So here's why this is a problem. Take a look at your blood sugar. When your blood sugar spikes, your body cells have to absorb that sugar. So your body will send out an insulin hormone, your pancreas will. It'll tell these insulin receptors will get bound with insulin, and the sugar will simply go into the body cell. However, after a long period of time, as little as 2 months, for most people this takes years, your cells will get tired of constantly taking in this extra blood sugar. So what do? Well, they do the smart thing. They save themselves. They're not smart. They don't realize this is hurting the body. They will do a process called downregulation, and they will stop making insulin receptors on their plasma membrane, which means they will no longer take in sugar. Now, this is a problem for 2 reasons. One, these cells actually might need sugar, especially if they're a nerve cell in your brain. But now the blood sugar has nowhere to go. So now you have chronic high blood sugar, which causes its own problem. So this, what I just explained, is how type 2 diabetes develops. Once again, this can happen as little as 2 months. We know NFL linemen have this problem a lot when they retire. They're still eating 10,000 calories a day, but they're no longer working out, and blood sugar spikes, and this process of downregulation can happen quickly, a couple months. For most people, it's going to take years to develop this, but once it happens, it is almost impossible to reverse this and get these cell membranes to make more insulin receptors. It can be done. We'll talk about how. All right, so for your notes, we're going to compare type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So it doesn't have to be as fancy as my notes. This can be in your notebook. Should be in your notebook. So title at the top, diabetes. Make 3 columns. Type 1 is in the second column. Type 2 is in the third column. And there are 8 things that we're going to compare. So pause the video, write these 8 things down, make your chart, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So what causes this? Well, we talked about type 2. So what causes this? This is basically constant high blood sugar. So constant high blood sugar, that's going to be a problem because that's what's going to actually cause type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a little different. This is not something that's necessarily preventable. Your own immune system attacks the pancreas. So the immune system pancreas? I don't know if I spelled that right. That's okay. So the immune system attacks pancreas. So these are, what causes these is not even close to each other. Here's an autoimmune disease, and here is an environmental thing. Problems with body. So let's do type 2 first, because we already kind of talked about that. So what's the problem with your body in type 2? Well, your cells are refusing to respond to insulin. So let's say your body cells are ignoring insulin hormone. Now, that's not the scientific way to say that. The scientific way to say that would be your cells are, what's the word, insulin resistant. So your body's becoming insulin resistant here. But your body cells are ignoring the insulin hormone. Therefore, they refuse to take sugar out of the bloodstream. Now, what's the complications? Well, the biggest complication is going to be the more sugar you have in your blood, the thicker it is, the more viscous it is, the more syrupy it is. So the complication is going to be poor blood flow. Along with, feelings of fatigue, because if our cells aren't getting the energy needed. But poor blood flow is going to be the major complication, the life-threatening complication with type 2 diabetes. So this doesn't block your major blood vessels necessarily, but it does block your capillaries, because capillaries don't flow well with syrup. So organs like skin, kidneys, liver, stuff like that will have a huge problem with this kind of capillaries being blocked off. I got a friend with type 2 diabetes. He has a sore on his foot that won't heal because skin is one that's highly affected by this loss of blood flow, especially in your feet because they're already far away from your heart. So, he's got a sore on his foot that won't heal. If he doesn't get his type 2 diabetes under control, then eventually it'll end with him losing his foot. How long will that take? I'm not sure, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Treatment for this. So what's weird about type 2 diabetes is the treatment is also the prevention. It's kind of weird. However, the treatment's a little more intense. So how do you treat this? Well, if the body cells are ignoring insulin, what I have to do is I have to take this cell and I have to starve it. And I have to fatigue it. If I starve this cell and fatigue this cell, and it's not getting all the ATP it needs, then it's going to start slowly putting more insulin receptors back on its plasma membrane. So how do you starve and fatigue a cell? It's easy. And by easy, I mean hardly anybody can do this. Extreme diet and exercise. So with extreme diet and exercise, you force the cells to basically do the opposite of downregulation, which I don't know what that is. I don't know the scientific word, but they will add these receptors back and they will start responding to insulin and they will start pulling blood sugar out of your blood. So that increases your blood flow and it gets sugar to the cells that need it. So the treatment for type 2 is extreme diet and exercise, but most people, once they get type 2 diabetes, they're simply not going to do this. It's really hard to do a lifestyle change, especially later in life. All right, let's go with type 1. What's the problem with your body? Well, if the immune system attacks the pancreas, specifically the beta cells in the pancreas, your beta cells can't produce insulin. And if you can't produce insulin, then you can't signal your cells to actually take in blood or sugar from your blood. So what's the complication? Your cells are not getting sugar. And we know from the muscle unit, sugar is the start to any process of making ATP. Even creatine phosphate requires sugar to build the creatine phosphate molecule. So cells aren't getting sugar. Basically, we're going to have fatigue. You could go into a diabetic coma, stuff like that, if the brain's not making enough ATP. So what's the treatment? Well, the treatment is going to be insulin injections, sometimes called insulin therapy, insulin shots. There we go. I can spell that, no problem. Insulin shots. Okay, so that's going to be an easy treatment. Let's just give them some insulin. Problem solved. This type 1 diabetes will be a disease that we have a cure for before type 2. I'd almost bet money on that. Meaning, we know what causes type 1. It's one specific cell that can't do its job. That's going to be an easier thing to fix than, billions, if not trillions, of cells in the body just ignoring a hormone. So this is going to be a bigger problem to fix than type 1. So this is, I don't know if I said this, type 2 is the #1 growing disease in the United States. We can kind of see why. Constant high blood sugar is something that, a lot of Americans have, and pretty much any developed country. All right, insulin dependent. So yes, these people are, type 1 is insulin dependent. If you have to have insulin shots, then you are insulin dependent. What about type 2? Do these people need insulin? Remember, the bottom is their body's ignoring insulin, not that they can't make insulin. But if your pancreas is constantly seeing high blood sugar, the pancreas is constantly turning out high amounts of insulin. And over time, over years, your pancreas can actually get fatigued. And these beta cells that produce insulin can actually basically fatigue to the point where they can't produce insulin or they die. So are type 2 diabetics insulin dependent? About 40%. Usually some of the ones with the worst type 2 diabetes become insulin dependent, meaning they have to take insulin because their body can't no longer produce it. All right, guys, and the last three ones are prevention, other names, and percent of population. I'm going to have y'all look those up on your own. I will say prevention for type 2 is kind of the treatment. Instead of extreme diet and exercise, prevention is just very simple. Basically moderate diet and exercise, eating meals that don't spike your blood sugar and eating less meals a day. But moderate diet and exercise will actually fend off. Once you get type 2 diabetes, once your cells start ignoring insulin, it's really hard to bring that back up. That's why the treatment is extreme diet and exercise, but the prevention is just slight diet and exercise. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow morning if you want ask questions, and the test is going to be on Thursday and Friday. Have a good day, guys.